All right, what's up, guys? Today, what I want to do, you probably see from the title of the video, we're going to talk about revisions. Um, by the time this video goes live, I will have posted your grades for paper one. You can find those on Turnitin. Um, I'm not sure how to start. I guess at the end of the video, I'll go ahead and pull it up so I don't forget. At the end of the video, I'll show you how to access your feedback because sometimes students don't realize that they have feedback. So I'll just have that up right there. Um, Anyway, that'll be at the end of the video. Before we talk about the papers themselves, feedback, things of that nature, I want to talk to you about revision. So what you have in front of you, both on the video and also on CourseDen listed as a separate document, um, is an example from one of your classmates. This is their introduction and their first body paragraph. Now, of course, I've done a little bit to it. Hopefully, you can tell I've broken it up for reasons that we will also discuss in a moment. Anyway, the goal here is actually two things. Number one, I want to talk to you about your first papers um, in the hopes that you revise. I think everyone will, for the most part, should. Um, but two, and I've talked about this, I think pretty much the whole time we've been talking about the second paper, so much of what you do in the first paper is still a part of paper two. So even if you are sort of in the minority who decides not to revise for one reason or another, um, everything we talk about in this video is still completely applicable in one way or another to our second paper. Okay, so to begin with, like I said, we have our introduction here broken into some parts. We have our first body paragraph. Um, all I want you to do before we can dive into all the particulars, go ahead and read through the document. You're not, there's no way I can do that in the video. I can't scroll for everybody. There's no way to make that happen. So pause the video, go read the document, post it to CourseNet if you would please, and we will discuss it. Go for it. All right. Hopefully you're back after reading. I always just say hopefully because I can't know, and it's a strange place to be. Now, um, there are, as any time we do a workshop, there are some successes in this draft, and there's some things we got to work on. What I want to do today, and this may have been somewhat obvious to some of you, given how I've broken this up, I want to talk about structure when it comes to our papers, and use that to talk about how we build these things out. Okay. To begin with, in the introduction, um, if you can remember, and of course, if you can't, sorry about that. If you can't, feel free to refer to your notes. What are the parts of an introduction, right? Well, there's four of them. There's the hook, which is optional, but you can have it. There's an introduction to the text itself. There's the roadmap, and there's the thesis. We have three parts listed here in our introduction, and logic would dictate that those are the last three, the ones that are necessary. So we don't have a hook, and again, it's optional. If we were to have one, it'd be right there up top. Everything after that, though, more or less does its job, right? Our introduction to the text here, of course, introduces the text, which is the documentary, gives a brief summary of the text. I should point out this is a sentence fragment here at the end. Now, granted, that is a monster sentence that I do agree they want to break up, but they haven't done it correctly. So anyway, that's our introduction to the text. Below that, we have our roadmap, which is probably a little bit long for this paper, but I should emphasize when it comes to the parts of an introduction, your roadmap should pretty much always be the longest part. So well done there. And then finally, our thesis. Now, I'm not going to spend terribly too much time on the introduction to the text. Again, they more or less do their job. There's some grammatical concerns right here that we're not going to really focus on right now. But in general, they do what they need to here. So, I can live with that. The roadmap. The roadmap is really where our analysis in the paper starts. Okay. And your analysis, oh, that's fun. Your analysis is the most important element of your paper. That is, by and large, where your grade is won and lost. So your roadmap is one of the most important parts of your paper. Well, how do we do? If you need to, you can go ahead and pause the video and review the roadmap here real quick. I'll give you just a beat to pause if you want. Go ahead. All right. So what are we looking at? Obviously, we have three sort of distinct things that we're focusing on in the roadmap. We have this O'Neill person, we have Siebert, and then we have the family drama sort of here at the end. Before we dive into specifics, I want to clean up one thing toward the top that will both sort of shorten the roadmap a little bit, but it'll also just make it easier to read. And we don't get to talk about writing itself enough, so I want to show you one sort of quick fix that a lot of you can do. It's the sentence, let me see. Yeah, Kathy O'Neill. Kathy O'Neill is a very credible source. Immediately, I'm like, why is she a credible source? That's a slightly different issue, but if you're going to say a thing like that, you got to usually explain it. Anyway, she's a credible source who has an interesting quotation about halfway through the movie. Immediately, again, I'm like, what is interesting about that? Now, I should point out, this student is correct. I'd say 9 times out of 10 at least, you don't want to quote the source text in your introduction because you just don't have time to discuss it. But there are different ways to go about talking about it. And again, I just want to reiterate, if you say something like, well, this is an interesting quotation, your reader invariably is going to say, what quotation? What's interesting about it, right? So you're bringing it up without actually telling us what it is. That's nobody likes that, right? But what do we do in the next sentence? She reinforces the idea, and then we're talking about what her idea is. This is actually what we wanted to talk about. All this, we're kind of getting at what we want to talk about, if that makes sense, but you'll notice we haven't really said much of anything. She's a credible source, which again, I think we should explain. We could just say she's an expert. But then the rest of it, she has an interesting quotation halfway through. Let's assume she said something interesting because we're bringing her up, right? If she didn't say anything interesting and we're bringing her up, we've made a mistake already. But here's what we can do. It all comes down to verbs. In this case, reinforces here in our second sentence and has here in our first sentence. Let's do this. We just substitute one verb for another. She's a very credible source who reinforces the idea. We've lost nothing. See? And again, this is what we really meant to talk about. But just when you're drafting, and I know I've said this before because I say it all the time. When you're drafting, you don't know what you want to say. Oftentimes, you will unintentionally first draft it in a sentence, and then in that very next sentence, you'll have your second draft, and usually your second draft is better. In this case, it was. Cool. So we've cleaned it up a little bit. We could do that probably 1 or 2 more times throughout this roadmap, but I just wanted to make the point that it is, once you know how to do it, a pretty easy fix actually, right? You just go to your verbs, and those are usually the places where you can make pretty sweeping changes pretty quickly in your sentences. Okay, let's talk about the roadmap itself. Oh, hang on. Okay, so I'm not going to space this apart. I don't want to make it too wonky. Basically, the biggest issue here is still this. She reinforces the idea social media is taking advantage of people with her opening quotation. She does do that, I guess. She wants to make it clear that social media does all this. I suppose that's true too. The problem with that is that's her argument. And again, we got to bring that stuff up, but our job is to talk about what we're going to say about it. Okay? So, to be completely clear, I'm not sure. I mean, I once you read the second paragraph, you start to figure it out. But we got to know up here what it is we're trying to say about these people or about the things they say or what have you. So in this case, I'm not sure if we're focused on the fact that she's credible. I'm not sure if we're actually focused on her argument itself. if it's a combination of the two things, which is possible, because we just don't say. All right. Um, yeah, I mean, without getting into the body paragraph, which we haven't done yet, we can't know, but solving this would then help us come back up here and solve this. But basically, this whole section, I want to highlight it for us. This whole section, we've yet to make an argument on our own, okay? We kind of begin to make one maybe right there, but that's it. 3 words. It's just not much, okay? Let's look at another example. Earlier in the documentary, so we were moving to somebody else, Jeff Siebert, another credible source. Again, we could just say another expert, something like that, is introduced. Already, I'm like, do we need to say he's introduced if we mention him? And we've already said, like, we don't need this sentence, okay? Siebert opens up with a shocking quotation. All right, so maybe we're talking about the fact that it's shocking, I guess. His goal with the quotation was to make it loud and clear. We could lose that. By throwing it in the viewer's face, we could lose that. Like, we have a lot of padding here. The first chance he got. All right, so we haven't really said whatever it is we're trying to say yet. The statement is truly meant to scare the viewers. Okay, that's rhetorical effect. We're scaring people, I suppose. Show that the topic is serious. We haven't said what the topic is. Documentary uses shocking facts. It also tells a story of family. Okay, so we're moving on. So again, in this case, the only real rhetorical analysis we get to is like here and here, but we haven't actually said where it comes from. And again, they're smart, they're correct not to quote the guy here because they don't have room. But the problem is they really want to, and honestly, I think it's short-circuiting their attempts at analysis. Now, what I should tell you, because we don't have this paragraph in this copy that I've given you, that's not actually what they end up talking about anyway. In the paragraph about this Siebert guy, sure, I suppose the quotation they pull from him is a little bit shocking. But that's not where the analysis starts. What he talks about is privacy and the fact that we have none. Okay? He says something to the effect of, I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's like, everything you do online, like you're being watched. Like the social media companies know all about it. They track you, right? Something like that. Is that shocking? Sure, potentially. But why? We got to start there, okay? It's shocking because he's saying you have no privacy. These companies track your every move, things like that. So let's start there. Earlier in the documentary, yeah, sorry, I said cut that. Another expert, Jeff Siebert, points out these companies track your every move online. This shocking lack of privacy, right? And all of a sudden, like, I know I'm kind of talking over myself here, but like, that's the point. You can say that it's shocking if you want to, but we're skipping a step. We got to start with the evidence itself. What is the main idea or the main element to tie it into your homework again? The main element of the evidence we're considering. It's not the fact that it's shocking. That's the second step. The first step is you have no privacy. That's his argument, right? This student feels like that's a shocking piece of information. Okay. But to prove that it's shocking, to try to talk about it at all, we have to provide the proper context, the proper information, and that's this discussion about privacy, okay? So easily the first 2 sentences in this section we could lose. We talk instead about what it is Jeff Siebert actually says. We could paraphrase it a little bit. We could talk about the fact that that's shocking. Let's leave out the throwing it in the viewer's face. I do know what that is, but again, that's if we're going to talk about rhetoric, that's not really what we're aiming for in a paper like this. Instead, let's just talk about why that's shocking or why it's effective, why it's scary. They say it scares the viewers, and I think we can. But the reason we're not able to here is because we don't provide ourselves with the proper bit of information. All right, last section of the roadmap. All right, a family torn apart. I assume you guys don't watch cable news, but this the student sounds a little bit like cable news, like it's a little bit sensational. We want to tone that down. Um, Early in the movie, mom takes up cell phones, eat dinner without them. Okay, doesn't go well. They struggle to converse. Already, we were a little bit vague in the first two sections. I would say we're a little too detailed. I mean, actually, if you want to, technically, the section starts there. This is all information about that scene. And again, I understand why they're doing that because they're trying to describe the entire scene, but that would be better served in a body paragraph. Again, we don't really have that kind of space in an introduction. You'll notice, um, I said before, this should be primarily analysis. That's where your grade is won and lost. If we're doing stuff like this, if we're taking up room like this, all of that is room, is real estate where we can't make an argument because it's just taken up by information, right? We do get to some analysis, a bit of it down here. The goal of the scene is create a relatable situation, which viewers can only, we're repeating ourselves there, but sympathize. So really our main point is summed up right here. So really that's our analysis, right? In this whole section, which starts here, that's our analysis. So what's the trick? It's the same in an opposite way. It's the same as we talked about the first two sections of the roadmap. What are we actually focused on in this scene? It's not the whole scene, right? It's the idea that these people, this family, they have nothing to talk about. And why is that, according to the scene? Well, it seems to be pretty clear that they've grown so dependent, sort of upon their phones, upon like sort of shutting off to each other with their phones, right? Already, as I'm describing that, I assume, given my experience with people in the world in 2022, but also the way this student is writing, that you guys can relate to that, right? That feels familiar, probably. Okay, so that's really all we need. If you want to say early in the movie, I guess go ahead and do it. Early in the movie, a family sits down for dinner without their phones and struggle to even say two things to each other. I don't know. So that a single sentence, we could do all that in a single sentence. From there, you can now, for 2 or 3 sentences if you want, better parse not just the fact that we relate to that or sympathize with it, which is interesting, but why? And why does it matter? What is the effect of relating to that? Does it, I mean, pardon the cliche, but does it make the argument hit home? Does it especially resonate with a particular section of the audience? In this case, you guys, slightly younger. Do you feel like it resonates with actually older people too? Because there are adults in the scene who are trying to do probably what a whole lot of parents have been doing for the past couple years, right? Who are worried about this sort of thing. Um, any and all of that is on the table because we've given ourselves room now, okay? But it starts with, in all of these, pinpointing what it actually is you want to focus on. A lot of the information we have in here isn't unnecessary, but it's not necessary in the introduction. So that is to say, we could bring it up in a body paragraph. It makes more sense there. We have more room there to do this kind of work. Introduction, you got to be much more sort of accurate when it comes to what it is we're going to talk about. Okay. For the thesis is all right. I mean, again, I mean, honestly, the changes we would have to make to the roadmap, I think, would alter it to such a degree. I can't know. Just to be perfectly honest with you, I think if I were talking to the student directly, the kinds of changes I'd like to see to their roadmap, and anybody, for any of you who end up making like wholesale changes to your roadmap, I will always recommend taking another pass at your thesis because you're gonna do more work up here. Sometimes you may even change your mind entirely on things. Whatever the case, write that roadmap and then go ahead and just try another thesis. It will probably be pretty different from what we have here. So that's kind of all I mean, the thesis is okay as it is for now. But again, given the changes we're going to probably make in the paper, in this section in particular, the thesis would need to reflect that. All right, body paragraph. I got to get another drink. Sorry. All right. In like fashion to our earlier discussion, we have a body paragraph. Very quickly, I want to review with you the parts of a body paragraph. You have 3 parts in body paragraphs. Now, I call these the 3 I's because that's what I was taught way back when. That's identify, illustrate, and interpret. But as I always like to point out to students, if that helps you remember these parts, they did me. I still remember them. Great. If not, if you only hang on to what those 3 parts stand for, that's what's important. So the other way to talk about these, you have your topic sentence, which is right here. You have your evidence, which is right here. And then you have your analysis, which is all this. So what are those 3 parts meant to do? Your topic sentence is meant to do 2 things at once. Number 1, it should sum up your body paragraph. It should be the main idea of your body paragraph, right? Number 2, it should also be an argument. Now, of course, you are hopefully making an argument in every body paragraph. And so if you sum up that body paragraph, your topic sentence should also be an argument. If it's not, you either have a problem in the topic sentence and or the paragraph, right? But basically, you want to sum up your paragraph and you're really crossing your fingers that it's an argument because otherwise you got problems somewhere, right? Secondly, evidence. I think this one is basically self-explanatory. It's something specific from the text. Oftentimes in these classes, it's a quotation, but not always. For instance, the way they're talking about the family in the roadmap up here kind of sounds like that paragraph isn't going to be a quotation. But it's specific. It's something very specific from a scene. It's not the whole scene, something that happens, something that's said, something we're going to focus on. In this case, it's a quotation. Okay. And then finally, your analysis. Your analysis is where you use the evidence to prove your argument that you hopefully have. Now, for just a moment, go ahead and pause the video, sort of review this paragraph with those 3 parts in mind, and we're going to talk about it. Go for it. Okay, hopefully you're back. Now then, let's start with the topic sentence. To begin, it's revealed by that lady that social media's algorithms are used to create a certain goal set by its creators. Question number 1, is that an argument? I expect many of you will say yes. Better question, is that our argument? Or is it hers? Right? We're basically just summing up her argument. So it's summary. That's a problem. It's a trap that some of you fall into, right? And it's easy enough to do. Sometimes it just happens. But again, the thing you got to think about, especially in a movie like this, that is like overtly making arguments to you, that you're going to talk about, you got to really, probably at different points, sort of stand back and try to draw that line. Like, where are the arguments this person is making versus, what am I actually saying about them? In this case, in this first sentence, we haven't done that, right? So that tells us already, well, I think I know a little bit more about what we're focused on, right? Because we've kind of summed up her argument here, but I don't yet know what we want to say about it. So that remains to be seen. In the next section, the evidence, I would like better context. I mean, yeah, she expresses this. Okay, you got your synonym there. But why? Why is she talking about algorithms? Where does it occur in the movie? Do we transition from anything that might matter? That would help us a lot, actually, probably. We don't have it here, so all we have is the quotation. Algorithms are opinions embedded in code, and that algorithms are not objective. Okay, so that must have continued from something else because the way that sentence is worded kind of tells you it's leading off something else. Also, that's a comma splice. It's going to bug me. Algorithms are optimized to some definition of success. Okay. What do we say about it? If you need a second, you can pause here to review it, or you may just remember. I'm going to ask you the same question. Bearing in mind what we set up here, this is her argument. Some of this is her argument. And again, you may need to pause it for just a second after I ask this question. Go hunting for a second. Where does her argument end and our argument in this section start? Go look real quick. All right. So it may have taken you a second, and that's okay. I mean, but reading through this, a lot of this is her, right? And I'm going to go ahead and say too much of this is her. Can you or should you sum up her argument to some extent to talk about it? Yeah. In most cases, sure. But again, I mean, we've more or less done that in a sentence up here. Now again, that should not be our sentence up here, but that tells us we could do something similar down here. Our analysis doesn't really start until right there. That means all this is her. That's not good. Okay. But again, the way I would actually talk about these are more like notes, right? These are the ideas we've picked up on as a writer, sort of buried in her argument that we're interested in. Now, of course, when it comes to the final product, most of this probably shouldn't be on the page, at least not like this. But that can be useful. It's like, all right, so these are the things I'm focused on. Do I have anything to say about any of them? Well, let's start with what we have. This quotation makes viewers question how far media companies will go to keep their head above the water. This student has a real problem with cliches. They're just like to make money, right? And how long before they fold on their values in the name of monetization? Okay. How about we talk way more about that? I just feel like that's an interesting point to make and a potentially damning point to make, and we just do it in a sentence, right? Let's do without mic drops, right? Let's actually expand on these ideas. For instance, the question you can always ask yourself: why does this matter? To be more specific to this assignment, what is the effect of um, that approach on an audience? How do you think an audience would react to the idea that social media companies would do this, that they function like this, that this is their primary objective? Well, it's unsettling. I feel like I probably use that word a lot when we talk about this documentary, but that's how I feel about it. I mean, the fact that they have all this information about us, and they have these algorithms. Even the word. I mean, again, the way I was trained, anytime you quote a source, I'm always going to go back to the quotation itself, the language itself. We say that word algorithms 3 times. And that may be something you guys are a little more comfortable with than me, just because you're fresher out of high school. But I'll tell you this from experience: the further away you get from math class, the less comfortable you're going to be with a word like algorithm. Okay, that's just a big, scary, dark word that doesn't mean anything in day-to-day life, right? And the way she's throwing it around is she's saying, like, basically this thing is gonna sort of watch you or govern you in some sense online is unsettling. It's I don't know, it's almost monolithic, or it's like, again, it's just a big scary computer word uh that you feel like unpowered. That's not really a word, but I hope that makes sense. Like it makes you feel, I think, as an audience, as a viewer, less in control, or maybe not in control at all, right? Because you're kind of going up against math in this case, right? And I mean, generally speaking, math is kind of undefeated, you know. So look, what am I doing right here? I'm just kind of spitballing. And again, that should be part of your process. Not everything I just said, especially the way that I said it, would end up in a paper. But I think that's a good place to start. So when we make this point, and this is the beginning of our analysis, cool. Let's go back to the quotation then. Or whatever our evidence is, let's dig up some specific details and let's talk about those, right? That's how we're going to make our argument. We even mentioned that Kathy O'Neill is concerned with algorithms. So again, I would argue that that's important. But why? Does it tie into this? Yes. Can we get way more specific? Absolutely. When it comes to trimming this stuff, I mean, we could do that real quick. So make money, scam social media intentions. How about this? I think, oh, got cocky. We're really just trying to say that last sentence. That's it. That's what we're trying to say. Okay. So now we have room. Oh, and this was a PDF is the reason the spacing is weird. Now we have room to talk about sort of, again, not just what she says, which is what we focused on, but how she says it, and the rhetorical appeals, the rhetorical effects of that phrasing. So it's not just that social media companies are trying to make money. By the way, the flip side of that coin, we haven't quite finished the argument. Um, it's not just that they're out to make money; they're out to make money, sort of above all else. Well, then the question would have to be, well, what is all else? I mean, as far as we're concerned, us, our information, our lives, the people we interact with, talk to, engage with online, the lives we lead online, which is becoming more and more, right? Uh, we're saying they don't actually care about that, which is again unsettling, because they're in charge of it. But again, if you get even more specific, I think algorithms is pretty important. I also think another phrase in here, opinions embedded in code, is really interesting. What she's trying to say there, I think, is that we like to think of algorithms as just math, which they are, but she's making the point that they were still made by people to do a particular thing. So it's not like they're entirely objective, right? And as soon as you sort of recognize, which is what she's trying to have us do, that these equations basically that are making social media work the way that it does, as soon as you're sort of made to realize that they that it's got these sort of monetary goals baked into it, uh, again, what is the effect of that? That's telling you that maybe it doesn't work in the way that you assumed, maybe it isn't as innocuous as you assumed. I mean, in my experience, anytime money gets involved, it just kind of makes things gross. I don't know if any of you have ever, messed up and like loaned money to a friend or something. That's almost always a bad idea because it just gets weird at some point, right? Similar idea here. Um, and again, you wouldn't have to talk about all of that, but the point I'm trying to make to you is you immediately open up all kinds of possibilities as soon as you get specific. Um, to reflect upon your homework real quick, this is all I'm asking you to do, right? I know we talked about it all this past week, but um, signs or elements, this is kind of what we're saying. Like if you were to quote either John Oliver or Joe Rogan or David Pakman, because there's two people in that one, I wouldn't want you to just pull a quotation. Like, what details from that quotation are you most interested in and why? That's how analysis begins, like real analysis begins. Um, what else about the revision? Oh, I should mention the way I do revision, because some teachers do it differently. If you, whatever you got on the first paper, um, as long as your revision grade is higher, I straight up just replace the grade. So I think on average, students tend to do about 5 points better. But honestly, every semester I'll have a student who will do 10 points better. Occasionally, I might have this is not hyperbole. I've had students in the past do like 20 points better. Now, of course, it depends on what you got on the original draft, but for real, if you got a grade that you're not happy with, which does happen, okay, this is a great opportunity to change that. Um, so whatever you got on the first paper, that does not have to be your grade. The revision, you can make that happen. One more thing I want to show you real quick, so I don't forget. That is my wife. Sorry about that. I'm not sure it's worth an apology, but you get it. All right, so let's get to turn it in real quick. That's us. All right, I'm gonna jump into somebody's rough draft. Um, there's no feedback on this. Sorry, Jazz. This is just her rough draft. We're not even looking at it. I just want to show you something. On your, this is what your kind of turn it in view is, okay? You have all this stuff on the side. I actually don't know if you have all of this because this is all for me, but you have some of this. I know you have this. This is your feedback summary. You click that. This is empty because this is a rough draft. And again, I don't want you seeing anything on anybody else's paper, but I leave you voice notes, okay? So when you go to your feedback summary and turn it in, this should pop out. You click the play button here because there will be a file here from me, and I will walk you through not everything that I think you could fix in your paper, but the really big stuff, the stuff that honestly will improve your grade, okay? Um, I know by and large that's what most of you are really concerned with. So I really do try to focus on the rubric and how it scores your paper and how you can address that stuff. Um, so I talk to you guys about MLA. I'll talk to you guys about topic sentences and what have you. Um, and I'll try to break down to the best of my ability how to make that stuff better. Now, of course, if you have questions about your papers, if you want to send me stuff, like if you I don't know, fix up a paragraph or something and you want some feedback on that, any of the above, you can absolutely do that. You can hit me up. We can figure that stuff out. What I don't want anyone to do is um, get so dialed in on the revision that they fall behind on paper two. That would be a mistake. But I do think this is the sort of thing, again, it's an awesome opportunity to improve whatever it is you got on paper one. I think most of you should do it. Not everyone will, which is a bummer. But anyway, um, I don't remember the date. Here, let's go find that real quick. It's listed in the syllabus, but if I tell you guys it's in the syllabus, I might as well just write it in the sky, you know. Let me see, syllabus. Oh wait, I'm in the wrong. Yep, I'm in the wrong thing. Damn. Hang on. Okay. That's us. Syllabus. All right. Let's see. It'll be bold. There's our first essay. There's essay 2. All right. Your revisions are not due until the 4th of March. So you got quite a while. Not quite a month, but quite a while. Again, I just want to illustrate for you here. Paper 2 is due the 25th of February. So at this point, if you're going to revise, you got to kind of do some scheduling. You got to figure out what you're going to focus on and when. Bear in mind, paper 2 is due first. But if you find yourself with a bit of time or enthusiasm or whatever, and you want to work on the revision, you can get it turned in early. There's nothing saying you can't do that, but it is due by the 4th of March, okay? And it's on Turnitin just like everything else. In fact, here. It's right down here. It's there the whole time. You guys just don't see it because you just got to scroll, and that's enough to hide it from you. But anyway, those are the due dates. Of course, what we have coming up. This is our homework for today. I've reviewed it several times. So hopefully it makes sense to you. For next time, we have an opposing arguments discussion post, which since I'm here, I can highlight for you. Basically, in that one, it kind of builds off of the homework that's due today. Basically, um, I want you to take one argument, like one specific argument from your paper. You're critiquing something about one of the videos. Okay, and here's your argument. I want you to do your best to play devil's advocate, if you're familiar with that phrase. I want you to try to argue against it. So if you think, I don't know, if you think the way that John Oliver is dressed and or the set itself, if you think those are positives for some reason, and that's kind of your a positive element of your critique, talk about that for a little bit, but then I want you to do your best to actually think about how that might be a negative. Okay? The reason we do this, there's multiple reasons, but mainly it just it can oftentimes help you think about holes in your argument if you look at the other side, even if you end up not agreeing with that other side. That's fine. But you can be surprised sometimes if you do your best to actually think how someone might argue against you, basically. So that's what we're going to do here. And of course, I'd like you to respond to each other for those discussion posts, but that's due for Thursday. So you got some time on that. Otherwise, that's all I got today. The video went a little longer than I anticipated. I apologize for that. Hopefully, it's helpful. And like I said, even if you don't end up revising, this approach is still where your critique needs to begin as well. So so yeah, it should be beneficial no matter what you decide to do. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.